on the air of the YouTube channel Kurbanova Live. Thank you very much for being with us, as always. By the evening, we have something to share with you, something to talk about, and of course, something to listen to performed by Mark Feigen, who for some reason came without a suit today. Mark, where is your suit?
You should just see what's down there.
No, thank you. That's enough for us.
Not true. There's something to show, but it doesn't matter. I welcome Elena. I welcome all the viewers of the Feigen Live channel, the Kurbanova Live channel. I welcome all the viewers who are watching us on the Feigen Live Telegram account, on the Feigen Live channel, and so to speak, live on the X network, also on the Feigen Live account.
Friends, thank you very much, wherever you are joining us from. And don't forget that naturally your help and support are very, very needed and important to us. I never would have thought that we would be attacked not only from Russia, but also a little bit from America. Therefore, we need your help and support doubly. So don't forget to leave your like. Be sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel Feigen Life, to the YouTube channel Kurbanova Life. Comment on our broadcast today. Every bit of your activity helps us incredibly. We will start with you, Mark, with a certain announcement. This is an event that we personally will not be able to share live in the coming days, but of course we will discuss it in any case. Trump announced that this will be tomorrow evening in America, which means it will be the middle of the night for Kiev. He will address both houses of Congress. It is indeed announced, as he himself explicitly stated or wrote, that it will truly be a great evening. Tomorrow will certainly be an evening of big events. Undoubtedly, I will tell everything as it is without any embellishment. It is expected that there, of course, he will talk about internal American politics, probably say something about foreign policy plans, but most importantly, in his announcement, Trump wrote that he called himself the only president who did not give away a single piece of Ukrainian land to Putin's Russia. So what do you think? Is this just an ordinary address? You know, President Zelensky has an annual address to the parliament. Many people give addresses. Or, since it's Trump, perhaps indeed, after all, should we certainly expect another earthquake?
Well, since he has never disappointed us in our expectations, there will probably be something like that. Because I even, going against my usual self, hoped in connection with Zelensky's visit that this would somehow, improve the situation, make it a little smoother in connection with Zelensky's visit and the signing of the agreement on mineral resources, about the resources that were planned. That's how it seemed to me. Well, I gave it a chance. I allocated some percentage, albeit small, to the possibility that, eventually he would say, come on, let's handle this properly, right? And we saw what we saw last Friday. Therefore, now to assume that such a speech will not be accompanied by something concerning our area of interest regarding the war in Ukraine, relations with Putin, the prospects of a peace plan, and now relations with Ukraine, one should indeed expect something spectacular that Trump will probably demonstrate. Well, that's what I think, because before this, I repeat, he certainly justified these expectations in the worst sense, to be frank. I hear statements that after Friday, after everything we observed in the Oval Office are being made, and I have little optimism that Trump will reconsider and say, we got carried away, but after all, there are America's goals. After all, there is a strategy and doctrine that implies the unity of the Western world, and we, as its leader, must give this hope to nations that strive to integrate into our Western space, into our reality. That is, we are somewhat, in a way, part of the process of the civilized world, which, in this vast and interconnected world, provides guarantees, creates hope, gives hope, and so on. But somehow, generally speaking, not many believe in this. Because then probably Trump wouldn't be Trump if he put principles and ideas above interests. That's how it is. I want to emphasize once again, I do not take on the role of an agitator for Trump, as some have twisted it here throughout the summer. Now, some have reconsidered, I was wrong. Such are the experts. They said Trump would stop everything in one day. Ukraine is a pie, salvation. Now they sing a different tune. I sing the same thing. I'm not a conjuncturan, just as I am not falling into a coma over the fact that Trump is the way he is. I accept reality as it is and understand that we will have to work with it. For the Ukrainian leadership, allies in Europe, and so on, In this case, I am an outside expert. I am not involved in the process. I can't pick up the phone and say, hey, what are you doing? I can't. I am nobody. Who am I? A blogger. I don't underestimate, but I also don't overestimate my significance. Well, to some extent, even if it's small, we influence an audience in Ukraine. In Russia, maybe we influence a tiny part. Maybe someone from the elite, people in power, listens to us, gets somewhat hypnotized, brainwashed, and will act in a certain way. Well, I think we influence some things. For example, this network of possibilities for changing Ukraine's non-nuclear status to a nuclear one, I think there's something like that. Still, we are hitting this topic with some distant tail, maybe not in a decisive way at all. We're not overestimating ourselves here. Well, there you go. And that's why he will speak there. You know, I don't quite understand how he will get out of two things. I don't understand. God be with him. He'll say, this is what I think. And this is what I think. And this is how I walk for America. He has cornered himself on two things. First, he is now completely dependent on how things will unfold. If suddenly, yes, they tell Putin, we are for peace, we are ready to concede here, we are ready to meet our Donnie halfway, and so on, then yes, he can play back this whole story on Friday. And if they tell you, listen, balalaika, Sophia, beard, and then what? And then they will reasonably say, wait, did you arrange all this just to get this? But for now, we hear this, right? That is, Lavrov is voicing this. Well, it only remains for Putin to say, listen, no, what territories does he have? He says he hasn't given up a single territory, so you'll give it up too. You'll give it all up. Putin is asking for all of Ukraine from him. Don't they understand that they don't understand it in the State Department? They don't understand it in the White House. Well, I have my doubts. They don't understand it at all. Well, I really have strong doubts about that. That they don't understand that the price of relations with Moscow and all subsequent goals regarding China and everything else is Ukraine. Let's not play the fool. Why am I emphasizing this? Yes, and secondly, how will he behave with Putin? They will meet. Right now it's unclear. He might meet and say, oh, Pavel Vladimirovich, let me hold your suitcase with excrement. Sit down, dear, let me help you. Like that. He might say, listen, are you okay? He might say, wait, you're really warming up the tails. And so he doesn't sit right, doesn't speak right, isn't dressed right. What about this one? At least tell him who he is. No, you can't do that. What, will he get offended? You understand? Well, it's like you've put yourself in a situation where if you act like this with him, everyone will say, well, it's clear. It's clear who the alpha male is here, who has control over whom. Well, you've just cornered yourself, that's all. By the way, he acts here and there, you understand. And the second thing is, what if all this, princess, what if there's nothing there? If Putin says it's nothing, he's giving us all of Ukraine. I'll do whatever I want. And then what, and how will he look? He promised it would be done in one day. Exactly. How he will get out of this, I don't know. I fully admit that he might say, no, doctrinally we are now like this. We are now finding common ground. A totalitarian, authoritarian dictator in competition with a weak, democratically elected leader, this doesn't concern us at all. Doesn't concern us at all. Maybe so, maybe. America's interests are higher, we'll make money, we'll get rare earths. Maybe, just maybe, perhaps, indeed maybe, but we need the other side to play along, and I don't see him playing along much. In words, maybe rhetorically he might say, indeed, yes, Trump, you're the boss, and so on, but perhaps give up Ukraine, and not to mention their mutual courtesies, especially from Trump's side. That is, if he meets with Putin now, for him, it will be an absolutely disastrous losing scenario in any way. Absolutely, because he cannot behave better with him than he did with Zelensky. Otherwise, it's like, why are you scolding Zelensky, even though he is clearly dependent on you due to his position, and yet you are flattering this one? At least wipe off the crumbs. We used to joke about splinters. You can't do that. It's better for him not to meet until he has definitively resolved the issue with Ukraine. Otherwise, it sounds unclear. Yes, well, there you go. We keep coming back to the same thing. Trump promised in 1 day, in 100 days, and so on. But what if not? What if there's nothing and there won't be anything? Then what happens next?
Well, it's clear. He already said, Mark, he said that President Zelensky doesn't want to end the war. There you have the traps.
It was all set up correctly. Everything was arranged to blame Zelensky. In the person of Zelensky, Ukraine was framed. But now the facts about the setup of this situation are already crumbling. The one about the suit you mentioned, he is the one bothering Green, right? He even apologized, no, I haven't heard that.
There is a video online where he apologizes.
For heaven's sake, let them do whatever they want. But why are we talking about this? It's clear she's a Ukrainophobe. Well, fine, that's her right too. I'm not denying her the right to hate Ukrainians. Well, it's obvious if her man comes and asks. Well, how can you not connect one with the other? Well, wait, do you need some special deduction for this? It's clear he came and said, hey, why aren't you in a suit? Why didn't he really ask this question to Ben Salman? He also asked this question to Ben Salman. Will he meet the fate of Khashoggi or what, who was brute and sodded in acid there? Well, it's clear you can talk to this one like that, but not to that one. Don't they want to say that to Putin? Why did you come with a suitcase full of excrement? Will you cut it off or what? Well, ask him this question. No, so that, as they say, it's the same for everyone. It's clear all this was set up to say we are removing responsibility from ourselves. It couldn't be done in one day because this one doesn't want to. Well, it's clear. No, we understand everything. We understand everything. We are not fools. That is, we are not fools. After all, we've lived a life. I know how all this is done. I know to set it up so everything looks, it's possible. It's a technical question. What does Ukraine have in this situation? Paradoxically, I believe that, again, it's not for me to judge. They can manage without you. I need fair troops and forces. We hate you, Russians, as Zelensky said. Not a question at all, not a question at all. He has the right, unlike most Russian commentators, I repeat, he has the right. But I will still express my opinion and then do as you wish. Even in this situation, you need to play it to the fullest. Say, well, you mentioned 3 conditions. That's what I heard from Volt. He voiced it. On various repetitions, the same Volt, the National Security Advisor, said that at least some form of apology is needed. Well, not apologies, but at least regret, he said. I think I'm translating this correctly from English. Regret. Well, to say that it's a pity we talked with Donald like that. The second thing is to sign an agreement on the subsoil. Well, okay, to sign an agreement on the subsoil. Okay, because if the question arises that they said the agreement will not be considered, without personal apologies, but he spoke of regret. So a form of apology could be regret. This is already editing. The foreign ministries of the 2 countries should agree on this. It's not just Zelensky coming out and saying it. He thanked them 100 times. Thanked them 100 times. Nothing satisfies them. No, you agree with them. Sign what I'm telling you now. I regret it. And that's normal. It's accepted in practice, ethically and diplomatically. It's a normal form of apology. Well, I regret it. Well, I got heated. Well, what can you do? This can be done. Sign this agreement. I repeat, so to speak, sign this agreement. It will still come into effect. They started analyzing it, whatever it is, post-war. And thirdly, I think something was mentioned about being involved in negotiations. Yes, but in some capacity. This also needs to be agreed upon separately.
Admit that you want peace.
That you want peace, and I haven't heard anything about Zelensky not wanting peace. Well, I don't understand what this is about. And all this is happening, I emphasize, against the backdrop of the absence of Trump's peace plan. He is being asked for some kind of ceasefire there, and we don't understand what it's about. Is it a unilateral ceasefire, a bilateral ceasefire? And Putin has already said that he agrees to a ceasefire. I want to hear that, well, how come Putin agrees and you don't agree, right? It's about ceasing fire, holding elections for a month, and then a peace agreement. Okay, so they will allow elections to be held and Zelensky will win them. Well, okay, that's the second thing. And Azov will win them. What's the difference? That's already the third issue. So in such a situation, it's indeed better to carry all this out. To do it, find an adequate, acceptable form of regret for Ukraine, for the commander-in-chief of the Ukrainian forces, Zelensky, like, listen, we got carried away. Well, regret. All right, forget it. Let's move on. Sign that damn agreement so that later no one says the fate of the country depended on Zakharyuchka and that he refused because of his arrogance, fame, and ambition. Now let me sign it with you. And do you know why all this needs to be done? Well, then say that I'm for peace. All right, for peace, because they won't succeed. They won't succeed. Moscow will say, here's your balalaika. They won't succeed. Moscow will say, but we need something else. Here are your 3 conditions. And we want all of Ukraine. In what form? Here are the Istanbul agreements. And here's where the snag will begin. Perhaps Trump will want to announce some outline of the plan tomorrow during his address to both houses of Congress. Maybe, I don't know. I don't know that he doesn't consult with me. But without the plan that he needs to announce, Trump needs to announce the peace plan that he proposes, or he should say, I support the peace plan proposed by Moscow. He is obliged to do this so that the Ukrainian side, Europe, and other participants interested in the peace process can come forward and say, until he does this, well, we can agree to these conditions. On the condition that there will be a peace plan, since he decided to discuss everything publicly, we sit down like this and discuss it in front of the press. Well, then be so kind as to announce your plan. I really don't understand. Zelensky should have said, Dear Donald, you are great, you are a genius, but please, now in front of the press, tell us what your plan is. What the hell is your plan? That interjection, hell, they interpreted it as if he called someone a bitch, but hell, in the Russian language at least, is, well, you know, connective word. They don't understand, it's too complicated.
Oh, interjection.
Well, maybe it's an interjection, but here hell is a noun, so it can be used however you like. There you go. A connective form, so to speak. Please state the plan. Where do we sign? But please state the plan so that we can clearly express our stance on it. Not me, Zelensky, but let the Ukrainian people speak. And I am its product. And whatever the Ukrainian people say, the form of that expression will be found, whether it will be a referendum, the Verkhovna Rada, or some other method. A special assembly might convene and so on to discuss this peace plan, and I will simply pass it on to you, that's all. Well, probably like that. Again, I want to say, I do not decide for Zelensky or for Ukraine. They try to catch me by the tongue. Don't hang on me. I am simply expressing my point of view. Once again, only my own, no one else's. And I'm not imposing anything on anyone, but I see it this way.
That's all. You know, today I was sent material and analysis of what happened in Katz's Oval Office. This is a Russian, I don't know who he is, a former politician, oppositionist, whatever he calls himself, a blogger. Yes, Katz. How he positions himself as an oppositionist. He understood I'm not judging, right? In general, it's an amazing story, but he concluded that Zelensky is to blame for everything. Zelensky, who else, of course? When all this was sent to me, I said, look, whatever you watch, whatever you listen to, you must ask yourself one single question. Why is this person telling you this? Well, for example, Mark Fagan says he supports Zelensky. What does that mean? It means that he most likely wishes victory for Ukraine, for the Ukrainian people.
Yes, of course.
If a person takes a long time to analyze and concludes that President Zelensky is to blame, it's interesting, whom did he help and what will come of it? The hatred of Ukrainians, the hatred of Russians, the hatred of people living abroad. In general, for me, this is an absolutely anti-Ukrainian position. You know, my attitude towards Yulia Latinina, somehow, for me, they are peas in a pod. And the further it goes, the more there are. So who's working against us? You already mentioned that, indeed, everyone is now making statements that President Zelensky should apologize. But then I ask, what will we gain? A good relationship with the Americans. Great. Support military aid. Super, just to stroke Trump's ego. Well, something like that. So all these days, there's been discussion about a statement deliberately thrown in, and BBC reports on it, that Trump's team confirmed they are discussing the possibility of canceling military aid to Ukraine against President Zelensky. So I want to remind you that President Zelensky, whether you like him or not, is not in a trench. He is not in the Kursk region, nor in the Kherson region, nor in Donbas right now. He is in more or less decent conditions wherever he is. He just returned from London. The punishment will be solely on the Ukrainian soldier, and by the way, also on the American soldier. We have many volunteers who serve with us. Nevertheless, today, a close circle of Donald Trump is gathering. And they will probably go around saying how great and wonderful Trump is, kiss him in a certain place, and then they will start talking. One way or another, this is how it is perceived here now. And you know there are behind-the-scenes rumors and theories about agreements on a change of power in Ukraine. Well, while some things are indeed behind the scenes, others are actually quite open, like all these statements from Lindsey Graham, Elon Musk, and all the others.
Of course, they are hinting as members of the administration.
It turns out that, including military support, 30 billion is being discussed until the year 2027. Everything that was handed over to Joe Biden's administration is now at stake for us. President Zelensky is being brought into this one way or another. And President Zelensky said, it's not an issue at all. I'll trade it for NATO membership even tomorrow. Nevertheless, was it possible to do so? Oh, now I'm being told that even the president of Argentina, Javier Milei, has taken and deleted all the photos with Zelensky. That's how quickly the love passed.
Well, it's a corporate game, that's clear. So regarding, as I mentioned earlier, I understand about Russian commentators, and to clarify further specifically in this context, I will address that separately, just to reiterate. So regarding regrets, apologies, well, in this case, you see how to interpret it. I believe that expressing regret about what happened is a mild form that could be permissible in diplomacy, not like, forgive me, I'm sorry, but rather, no, not like that. There is an appropriate, tactful way to express regret about what happened. And this is partially an acknowledgement that you were wrong, and the other side might have been somewhat awkward. And everything led to this. It wasn't intended, but that's how it turned out. You can find this form if then, no, you're apologizing poorly to us. Then they don't fall into the trap at all. He truly expressed regret, but unfortunately we can't get that. But this is indeed not it. This won't function properly anymore at all. You see, if Zelensky, for example, says that he regrets how everything turned out, although he has already carefully mentioned that it shouldn't be on camera, but if he says, well, I regret it. And if they say after that, this form is not right, we don't like it. Well, then, excuse me, that means it's all over, the last nail in the coffin on the way there to Putin. This means that none of these forms significantly matter. They have already ultimately decided for themselves that they are essentially giving up Ukraine, and everything else is just a pretext. And then it can be said, look, you asked for it, you were given it, but it's not enough for you, you don't want it. We need to move to a strong position. That's my logic. The logic is that you are all asking here, please, there's Iryuta, there's some oimant, like somewhere. Well, please, unfortunately, so we are ready to sign, and he was ready to sign this agreement. But if they hadn't fallen out, and if Trump had supposedly kicked out or not kicked out, didn't want to, well, fine. Zelensky would have remained a delegate. Wouldn't he have signed this agreement? He came to sign it. Well, maybe there was some point, but they would have discussed it, inserted it there, added 2 lines. What's the problem? What's the problem? You refused, and now you apologize. If Zelensky accepts this option, well, and this one says, well, here you go, then it's very difficult again. You are driving Trump and his administration into a trap. Then everything is clear? Well, then just say that you want to simply give up Ukraine and are looking for excuses to do it without taking responsibility. Well, here it is. It's obvious. Now it's clear. You see, one could have ignored it, just stayed silent. But in this situation, the fate of Ukraine, military supplies, and everything else are truly at stake. And the 30 billion that Biden decided on, and now they want to stop precisely Biden's decision, not their own decision, which they somehow made, but Biden's decision. Well, listen, this will give a huge carte blanche to forces within the United States to say, wait, what do you want? And these questions will be asked. They are already being voiced, but timidly, as excuses are made for why, what, and how. And yet he did not respect himself, the Oval Office, and so on. It's still possible, but if this is voiced and nothing happens, and if everything continues the same way, and the attempt to cancel the supplies to Ukraine, something else with Putin, but Putin cannot be. I heard, by the way, a phrase. He says he must stop. Trump said, personally, Trump, I watched the video in English. He came out somewhere on the lawn in his red brick house, said he must stop criticizing and insulting Putin. Insult Putin. Are you serious? Really? Are you serious? Really? Yes, I just heard for the first time that Zelensky is supposedly, as I understand it, a drug addict, allegedly a Nazi, as Lavrov said, a traitor or betrayer of the Jewish people, or so they claim. Are you out of your mind? Why on earth should he, generally speaking, do anything for Nixon? For what reason? For what reason? But if you don't want to talk about Putin, that's your personal business. But you can't set such conditions. Well, how can you set such conditions? On what basis will you set conditions? Also change the rhetoric. Don't even think about insulting Putin. Well, how is that? It's just, I'm just curious. Maybe you'll also force him to change his orientation, or what do you want? I don't understand. Perhaps. So there must be clearly defined conditions. You understand clearly defined conditions. Unfortunately, all right, regarding the whole situation, as I see it, let's proceed this way. I believe that Trump will still lose in this particular scenario, his administration, because their positions are very weak. It completely depends on the goodwill of Moscow. And the further it goes, no matter what excuses he comes up with to avoid responsibility, he won't have that opportunity. The sooner the resolution of this situation, so to speak, in favor of Ukraine will appear within the forces inside the United States. Let's put it that way. Because the arguments for why Putin should be embraced and Zelensky should be criticized will run out. You understand? They will become less and less, so to speak. He will constantly be making excuses, inventing, maneuvering, and this is a demonstration of weakness. This is a very clear demonstration that this engagement with Putin is indeed too strong. It cannot be hidden. Because if you are not dealing with peace in Ukraine, not engaging in negotiations with Moscow, then why aren't you distancing yourself from Putin? Well, where is the logic then? For you, Putin is only interesting as a controversial agent with whom there is rivalry and contradictions. But accordingly, it means we are forced to appease Putin because we must achieve peace in Ukraine. And then after peace, everything else will follow, almost like tearing him away from China, as Rubio himself says, and so on. They talk about the crazier idea of separating Moscow from China, guided by which they would surrender Ukraine, meaning we separate from China but strike Ukraine. Are you even remotely normal at all? That will never happen. Well, okay, that's what they think. We need to remove all this argumentation justifying the current administration. We really need to go for some kind of compromise option where we can say, you know what, look, we asked, we did this, we did that, we signed, and yet they still continue to do it, and they will be forced to keep doing all this, kissing up to Putin, negotiating at Ukraine's expense, and so on. Everything is happening at Ukraine's expense right now. In Moscow, nothing, a one-year extension of sanctions. These are all the negative actions that Trump has managed regarding the situation. And regarding Ukraine, forget about NATO. A literal phrase, forget about NATO. How can you forget about NATO? You decided on this at 2 summits. Starting from the Madrid summit, then Vilnius and Washington, that Ukraine will definitely be in NATO. So why forget then? And why forget? You already did this once in 2007. Do you see what it led to? And if you hadn't forgotten about NATO in 2007, maybe there wouldn't have been a war. Well, that's what we think, right? I'm saying all this because, yes, I looked at the results of the London summit, the hopes for a quick resolution that Europe will get involved, help Ukraine, maybe even deploy troops, and Britain declared its readiness for this. But, as I said, the problem with Europe is the lack of a unified decision-making center, the absence of determination and will that would allow Europe to take this step, and this prolongs the situation to Ukraine's disadvantage because there is no military solution, no military assistance in the resolution, and consequently the current situation is such that it is necessary to at least publicly demonstrate that in the person of President Zelensky, Ukraine is ready to fulfill certain conditions, but again, not at the expense of its own interests, not at the expense of the interests of the war, the support of the army, Ukraine itself as such, and so on. Probably in this situation, well, to have a clear conscience later to say, you know, we did everything, no one will reproach us. We did everything. What other conditions will there be? And it seems to me, yes, what should we do ourselves? We should continue making the atomic bomb ourselves.
You know, it seems to me that right now, hypothetically, Jack Sullivan is somewhere, I don't know what he's doing. Maybe he's already teaching at some university or writing a book, and he's thinking, you know, damn, you all really truly hated me. You all undoubtedly said what a terrible national security advisor I was. Well, honestly, we weren't wrong to think that this controlled escalation was indeed absolutely bad. And now there's Walt. And every time I think, well, first of all, I am indeed a big fan of Secretary of State Blinken. He's truly an absolute crush. But now there's Waltz, who says a peace agreement for Ukraine involves territorial concessions in exchange for security guarantees. What does that mean? Who the hell knows? These are still territorial concessions. Do they want 4 regions within administrative borders, or do they mean the line of demarcation? What security guarantees, if they said there would be no security guarantees at all? Well, indeed, the Prime Minister's spokesperson after the summit you mentioned in London actually said that there are several proposals on the negotiating table for a possible ceasefire in Ukraine, in fact. As far as I understand, some written or being finalized document will also indeed be presented to Trump. However, what surprised me was that the British ambassador to the USA urged Ukraine to cease fire first, and naturally she faced criticism there. Okay, I'm not sure if this works, but we imagine 1,200 kilometers. The Ukrainian military is given an order by our commander-in-chief or supreme commander not to shoot. Maybe, hypothetically, and even then I doubt it, for 24 hours. Well, perhaps it's possible to hold out somehow 5 minutes. 5 minutes. Okay, 5 minutes. But what kind of reaction are you expecting? Do you have a similar appeal to Moscow? Do you allow for the possibility that Europe is dealing with this? Trump, as you already said, has no plan, and most likely he won't be dealing with it. But is Britain capable of offering something better than essentially the British ambassador in the US with a ceasefire?
Look, regarding the concession of territories, again, we are hitting a wall. What concessions? Whose territories? Exchanging the Kursk region for Kharkiv. What do you mean? You haven't announced your plan. She has to make concessions. What concessions? Tell us 4 regions over the Ming border, new territories. Odessa needs to be given away. Can you be specific? They don't say anything. And they just exchange glances like that. You understand everything. We must understand public opinion wants transparency. Announce your plan if you have one. If you don't have it, then say so. Are you following Moscow's plan? Is Moscow giving you their plan and they are announcing their plan? Who doesn't know Moscow's initial plan? I repeat once again, they demand 4 regions within administrative borders: Kherson, Zaporizhia, Luhansk, and Donetsk, including the non-occupied part, up to the right bank of Ukraine. So Kherson needs to be given away again. Some might not understand, but in Ukraine everyone understands, though maybe in other places they don't quite get it. They demand, I remind you again, the lifting of sanctions, just like it was before Bergenstock. Well, yes, it's clear, a ban on Nato, which was already kind of given to them without any exchange at all. They are against any guarantees secured by bilateral agreements, which Ukraine has concluded with America and another 24 countries. All this Rammstein 50 alliances. Where are these 50 alliances? Where have they dispersed to, one wonders? They demand denazification and demilitarization, referring to the so-called Stambulski agreements, where there were no agreements at all. Moreover, this Witkov, Trump's representative, said that yes, they can serve as a base. The base can be in Istanbul, in North Africa. And here's the thing, it's not mine. That is, it means the army of 50,000, the withdrawal of all weapons that were provided to Ukraine. Isn't that right? Denazification is clear there. The state language, dismantle the Bandera monument. As we understand, amnesty for everyone, for everything, that means releasing everyone back and forth, those who work for Moscow. This one was taken by the SBU, this comrade. Yes, I don't know. I don't follow that closely, so it seems. As I travel around Ukraine, yes, to the fronts, he probably thinks I went to the wrong place to shoot. Well, I don't know. I'm not in the loop. I don't deal with intelligence services, but that's what I think. Yes, release such people and give them revenge. And accordingly, everything else follows on the list, right? No reparation, meaning Ukraine should not expect money from Russia, and so on and so on and so on up to the elections, in which there shouldn't be such and such candidates, but these ones should be, and we know for sure, one with a bare belly, another, well, with a bare bottom. Well, in general, we've seen them all. Am I understanding everything correctly? If I'm not understanding correctly, then just say it. Why are you demanding from others? You yourself should state what your plan is. You say that there is a plan. Trump said, I have a plan. This is his famous quote during the election campaign. Then he says after November 5th, after the victory, November 5th passed after January 20, right after January 20. At the Munich conference, there is no plan. So does he leave himself room to maneuver at any moment to say, I meant this or I meant that? No one understands anything. There is an opinion that he has no plan at all. I also hold the view that there is no plan. If he announces these 3 points now, we are asking for just these 3 points to be announced, which were discussed in the press. This is the Kellogg plan. Flight, which were announced in the summer by 2 generals who are in the circle. By the way, where is Kellogg? What kind of advisor, special envoy on Ukraine is he, and what is his role anyway? Where is he at all? Here is an 80-year-old general, a respected person, a distinguished person.
But by the way, I think, Mark, it is often said that Kellogg is absent because Kellogg sympathizes with Ukraine. Yes, he flatters the bank, but he won't carry the nonsense that others do, the ruble, the fighters, and all the rest.
Yes. Alan's answer is yes, exactly for that reason. Kelga, no, that's exactly why. Because he says, are you serious? But what did the plan consist of? 3 points? Yes, no NATO membership for Ukraine. It is important to understand that a demilitarized zone with European contingents, British, French, and so on, and a halt along the line of contact, not just some 4 regions. Let's have this plan announced, and then, well, Ukraine will say, well, NATO has already refused. Along the line of contact, well, from my personal point of view, it's impossible to deoccupy now. De facto, we are forced to accept this, but not agree to it. De jure, this territory does not transfer to Russia. Ukraine does not recognize this territory as Russian. Everything along the line of contact. Well, okay, fine. Along the line of contact, we cease fire. We don't move. We don't deoccupy, fine. Did Moscow accept this plan? It has already said no 10 times, 20 times. I don't know how many ways. So it turns out it is afraid to announce this plan of 3 points. It's not complicated, right? Since it knows Moscow's responses. What is France doing? France, through Macron, has now announced its own plan. Let's have a 1-month halt and ensure a ceasefire, not on land, but at sea, in the air, meaning mutual cessation of shelling and so on. Starting point, guarantees, then we proceed. And during this month, we introduce a contingent accordingly into the territory of Ukraine. Well, in principle, it's a normal plan. What's wrong with it? Well, at least let it be like this. I have a rhetorical question. Think Moscow will agree to this?
No, not at all.
So they are indeed convincing Trump, accept our plan and impose it on Moscow. Let me ask you, indeed, let Macron, thank God I'm a resident of France, let him call me, I'll tell him, and Moscow won't accept it.
Give your phone number on air, maybe they'll transfer it.
How do you know, Fedin, how do you know? Who are you? I'm nobody, I'm a blogger. But I know that it won't be accepted. Do you want to see for yourself? Now, try to announce and say Moscow accepts this plan, and you'll see the reaction. Although I repeat, the plan as an interim, as a kind of first step, would be good. But you won't get results from the other side. So does this mean that in all plans you must oblige Ukraine to unilaterally cease? Because, I don't know, ground operations in the air, on water, wherever. This implies that Ukraine must take this step unilaterally. In a bilateral manner, it's generally okay. Therefore, in reality, I strongly believe that indeed no plan will ever work. The answer is no plan will work. Why? Because Moscow doesn't want it? There are no other explanations. No. There aren't any, that's the truth.
Today there was information that the deputy head of the main intelligence directorate said that by midsummer, Russia plans to launch not 200, as they are currently launching more than 200 drones per day, but 500. So essentially, there's your answer to the question of whether Moscow wants it or will agree to it. In fact, it must be said that everyone gets it from Trump. Literally everyone, really, I would say. After all, the axis of good, not the axis of evil, because someone, for heaven's sake, take that smartphone away from the old man. He wrote the following, that Europe spent much more money on buying Russian oil and gas than on defending Ukraine. Is Donald Trump right? Yes, he is right. We know all these amounts, how they helped us. It's very strange, but okay. At the same time, there is information, and you know that Western media wrote about this all weekend, that Trump's special envoy, Richard Grenell, held closed negotiations in Switzerland about the possible supply of Russian gas to Germany through the Nord Stream. I remind you that the topic of the Nord Streams, they endlessly accuse Ukraine of being the one who sabotaged it. However, while our beloved Joe Biden was around, Russia was accusing Joe Biden, not Ukraine. We can't do anything, but this was done by the Americans. I don't quite understand. Trump's idea was to drill, earn, and strategically push Russia out with pricing. He was planning to sell this liquefied gas to Europe. How does the idea of the Nord Stream, which is endlessly beneficial to the Germans and Europeans with cheap resources and low prices, come into play now? They dream of the day they can ultimately return to it. But at the same time, America doesn't gain anything. Like his post, in his latest social media post, where he is now berating Europe and he is constantly urging them, well, to get active, to help more actively and effectively. But his aides are lobbying for Nord Stream 2. Does it add up or not?
it adds up because he is lobbying this issue. Without Trump's opinion, without his positions, none of this would have happened. No aids. Acting independently could resolve anything in Geneva or Grenelle or anywhere else without Trump's consent. This is a centralized administration where such peripheral initiatives are impossible. And here's why. Let me tell you, in the summer, during the period of major accusations that Trump was an agent of Moscow, and when the situation was unclear for many reasons, he said in the Wall Street Journal, "You accuse me of being with Moscow." And who ruined the Nord Stream? Then Biden came, he met the Washington Declaration with Merkel in 1921 and returned, "But I imposed it, I killed that Nord Stream." But then it was killed by the war and possibly blown up by, I don't know who, Ukrainians. Well, specifically health. Why wouldn't Ukrainians blow it up? Honestly, it doesn't trigger me if even the Ukrainians blew it up. But that's okay, I don't know. He recorded this as an asset during the previous campaign. Here's proof that I'm not pro-Moscow because I imposed sanctions against the Northern Party. And Biden lifted those sanctions. That's true. That's true. And now, considering what's being said about them with Moscow and resources and in the Arctic, it's clear that this is still not very authorized. That is to say, it's spoken about in general terms. And here we find out that Grenelle is negotiating and Putin is proposing something and they are discussing something. You understand? And here, it gets interesting. So, did you ruin Nord Stream to take it for yourself or what? Well, somehow, maybe they're giving it to Vitkov or someone. I don't know. I'm just trying to understand if such a discussion is indeed happening and ongoing, resume its operation. Well, maybe there wasn't a direct interest in the asset before, but now there is. Well, given the situation Moscow is in, let's cut it together. With a bow saw, maybe Europe's money, well, otherwise, what could be the explanation for the resumption of Nord Stream? They were shouting about reducing dependence on Moscow and its energy resources. Let me remind you, during Trump's period in 2016, remember he came and said, "Do you want us to protect you at our expense?" It was a fair accusation from Trump, and you will be getting energy resources from Moscow. He said, "Buy from us, buy from America." So what has changed now? Now, it seems European security, transatlantic security, can be cancelled, meaning not taking on the expenses of protecting Europe, but trading with Moscow, selling Europe gas, Nord Stream or something else, turns out to be possible, extracting money from there. Well, of course, this is a question for Europe. It should decisively influence the situation, and they might say, we will not buy. Although we don't believe in it, because you are right that it is profitable, because it is desired, it's money, it's cheap energy resources, and so on. And rather, so to speak, economic logic might prevail. Well, I admit it. To the detriment, again, of security issues of Moscow's interests and their implementation, not in a political or military way, but in an economic way. Why did we run so long only to end up here, right? Ran in circles, and now, together with Trump, they will be selling gas to Europe, one with shale, the other through the Nord Stream with natural gas. No, well, this is, of course, a brilliant idea. Reduce everything to money. So now reduce it to money. We have resources, rare earths here, gas, and so on. I think there is a basis for this. They refuse to talk about the fact that such negotiations are no longer being conducted. I think it's true. I think it's really true. And I think since there were leaks that Vitkov discussed these issues with Putin for 3 hours, I think there is a basis for this, and they really want to resume work on Nord Stream 2. My personal opinion, whether it will resume or not, is still unclear, because I already mentioned that during our broadcast, when everything happened on Friday, we had a broadcast with you, Alan, on Saturday. I already said that this is not a problem of the relationship between Zelensky and Trump. This is not even a problem of the relationship between Ukraine and the United States and its new administration, first and foremost. But this is a doctrinal problem of the United States itself. The United States is abdicating its role as the leader of the free world, the defender of its interests, the proponent of international law, civilized principles, and political democracy in the world, and is shifting to purely, 19th century style interests, where with a pith helmet and a cane, you can go around the globe collecting resources And it doesn't matter with whom and how to cooperate in this sense. It's even more advantageous to cooperate with an authoritarian and totalitarian regime because two people decide, and that's it. All of this will stumble, all of this will collapse. Excuse the expression. I don't swear much, but consider this as a kind of obscene language appropriate to the moment. It boils down to the fact that it's 4 years, only 4 years. And what will happen in 4 years? Let me remind you, from 2016 to 2020, there was Trump who just started all of this. Biden comes in and declares, I have restored transatlantic unity. I have brought back the Atlanticist policy in its original spirit to the relations with Europe. We are together again. America's leadership is indisputable because it stands as the guardian of the civilized Western world. And then in 4 years, it's the same story again. The problem is that in 4 years, it will be the same story again. I want to say to those who try to justify Trump's actions in getting closer to Moscow, claiming he wants to pull away from China, you won't pull anyone away. You are temporary, but they are eternal. Totalitarian systems, their relative strength lies only in the fact that power does not change there. Xi Jinping will remain in power in 4 years, Putin will remain in 4 years, but Trump simply won't be there in 4 years. No matter what anyone says, that he will make Pence president or someone else, I don't know. That's for the American voter to decide. I don't interfere in that at all. But Trump himself can be there according to the US Constitution. He's serving a second term, right? But according to the US Constitution, who will be with America, maybe it will split into 7 parts. I don't know. And then what will happen? That's exactly why all this is to the detriment of America and to the benefit of Russia. Why? Because during this period, it will somehow protect itself. Well, I'm used to Putin's Russia. Putin himself? Because, well, Russia is not asked at all. There you go. They will solve their problems, including economic, energy issues, isolation issues, diplomatic issues, and sanctions issues. And America will only lose because someone from the Atlanticist globalists will return, who will say, no, we are bringing everything back to American leadership. Forget what happened under Trump. Everything will be like it was with Grandma. Grandma Biden, do you understand? These flows will hang like dead weight, which will need to be cleared again, meaning everything will have to be banned and blocked again. We forgot to mention the Russian opposition, and I think it's worth talking about. On March 1st, there was a rally. We didn't talk about it. I mean, about cats. You mentioned cats, Latinina, and so on. The persistent problem of the Russian civil society and the people who represent it is that, specifically regarding this war and Ukraine, their intellect does not indeed allow them to comprehend enough to fully understand that Ukraine's defeat is their defeat multiplied tenfold. Regardless of the presence of Russophobia in Ukraine, it doesn't matter at all. Ukrainians may hate Russians, but if Ukrainians lose, these immigrants, this entire political liberal environment, if they hope to say, you know, we were for the ordinary Russian person, not for Putin, they will be declared traitors, perverts, and they will be killed. And the people will cheer and clap saying, right, right, right. Putin will become incredibly stronger, and their imperialism, which they tried, as Yulia Leonidovna says, this is our chemically pure imperialism, not like Putin's. She says, imperialism. So, dear friends, imperialism is only possible in the form of Putin. It is impossible in the form of Latinina or anyone else. I want to disappoint you. This leads you to justify Putin's power. They think they are so original. No, the same was with Stalin. The same thing, the first emigration, the threshold of the second, it was the same. These people came, oh, we are with Russia. Doesn't matter. The Bolsheviks are in power there. We must go to Russia. And there's the film East West, which I've mentioned many times, where Menshikov plays and so on. They return, their hands, oh dear, they get a black mark on the steps. The Bolsheviks, you know, towards the returnees, they were there was a change in the Vekovstvo, the whole movement. The young Russians, Kazembek was actually brought back. He stayed there for a bit and so on. Returned to Russia. Shulgin was also lured in on this theme, brought to them. And many people, Bunin being clever, said, go to hell, he says, with your Russia. Bolshevik Russia with the whole set, so that I could give you someone somewhere, and went to play cards with the blacksmiths. That's why, in fact, I would say that those people didn't understand anything. And that's exactly why they are in emigration. That's exactly why they are outsiders in relation to the political mainstream within Russia itself. And that's why they remain strangers to the people. You have to go your own way and not try to please. It's not about Zelensky and not even about Ukraine. It's about you. You still haven't truly comprehended that you absolutely can't stay in the middle, but they want to completely remain in this middle. But it won't work that way. You're either here or there. And success comes to those who are on the edge of one side or the other. Putin is already in power, and his idea, but Lenin, who took 50 million in gold, you understand, to advocate for the defeat of his homeland, no one read the works. I read them, I studied them because they made us in the institute and in school. And he became the power, and for a total of 7 extensive and long decades, he left a legacy of communism in the country. And the liberals, as they were called individuals of little influence, remained so in the political landscape. And in this situation, Ukraine's victory is the end of Putinism and the victory of any alternative. Not necessarily liberal, by the way. A fascist one could also win. But what difference does it make? It will all be better, all improved.
You know, I noticed, Mark, that everyone who no longer believes in Ukraine's victory, everyone who criticizes either Zelensky or Ukraine as a whole, everyone we know, Latinina, Arestovich, some Trumpists, Trump's entourage, these are all people who do not take physical part in our struggle. Every day I receive messages from Ukrainian soldiers. Some are in the Kursk region, some are on the Eastern Front, and every day they say we hit. I understand the extreme fatigue. I understand there are internal disappointments. Not everything is perfect, but no one has left their post and no one has given up. And to all those who just talk, telling us how bad everything is and that we need to agree to capitulation or unfavorable plans, we remind them of our favorite phrase. It may not be as relevant now because many others have emerged, but nevertheless, we send them all after the Russian ship. And considering, friends, the incredible power and influence of social networks today, look at what Elon Musk and Donald Trump are doing. Of course, as always, we urge you to resist, support us, leave your like, subscribe to the YouTube channel Feigen Life, and subscribe to the YouTube channel Kurbanova Life. Thank you to those who watch us on the social network X. Don't forget to go after our broadcast and write a couple of nasty comments to Elon Poddy Musk. And thank you to everyone who watches us on Mark Fagan's Telegram channel. As always, friends, we will see you again on Thursday evening. Mark, thank you for this hour and see you in a few days.
Thank you, Elena. I thank all viewers of Feigen Life and Kurbanova Life channels on X, live broadcast on Feigen Life and Feigen Telegram channel.